Do you know just how easy it is to confuse being available with actually bringing value? And this is especially for high performing professionals. If you've ever felt like the more responsible you become at work, the less permission you have to be inaccessible. Like being in charge just means answering every message immediately, solving every problem instantly, always catching the ball for your teams. You're in the right place. Boundaries should not weaken your leadership position. And in this video, I'm addressing how to be a strong leader at work without always being available. I'll be diving deep with 7 practical ways to protect your boundaries without dimming your strengths, your empathy, your sense of ambition, or even your humanity, so that you can safely protect that part of you that makes your career journey worthwhile. Hi. Welcome back to my channel, and if we are crossing paths for the very first time, my name is Nancy. I'm a former airline professional turned workplace leadership trainer and author, and you'll mostly find me on this platform discussing topics on matters of leadership, professional growth, career advancement, with very keen attention to your mental and emotional well-being. So if you're in or you aspire to take up a leadership role soon, I strongly believe that my kind of content will resonate with you. Kindly consider subscribing, press the notifications button on your screen and you'll be receiving timely updates whenever I release a new video. And thank you so much for joining and growing with this community. Effective leadership is not synonymous with constant access. You may have been conditioned to believe that availability equals commitment. Like if you respond fast, you care. If you stay late, you're dedicated. If you take on everybody else's stress, you're supportive. If people can reach you at any time, you're a strong leader. But being a strong leader does not mean being constantly reachable, emotionally overextended, or always ready to rescue everyone. True leadership strength is measured by how clearly you lead, how consistently you show up, how wisely you protect your own energy, how courageously you model sustainable success. And if you're always catching the ball, your team members may never learn to play the game. So here are the 7 practical ways that you can safely lead through boundaries. And the end goal is to become intentionally available. At number 7, the open door versus scheduled access. One of the things that I loved while serving in the aviation industry was the open door policy, where we could access our bosses when we were hard pressed with an issue that was actually affecting our productivity. It gave us that feeling like, we were always seen and heard. But then when you come to think about it, this can also invite constant interruption, especially if you're the kind of person who values deep work. And then you land on one of those days where everybody else seems to have a pressing issue. One of the reasons that people struggle with boundaries is that fear, that fear of your teams taking it personal, like you don't care, or you're not supportive enough, or you think you're too important. These are valid feelings, but they can also leave you feeling guilty. So the solution is to make your boundaries predictable and consistent. Create what we call scheduled access. Like, okay, in this case, it would be clear office hours, where you tell yourself, for example, instead of giving my team 10% of scattered attention the whole day, I'm going to put in 100% of undivided attention for 1 hour every single day, and any case that shows up outside of that hour is going to be addressed the next day, or it's going to be treated under miscellaneous. And this is going to challenge you to look into the mirror and ask yourself, what do people genuinely come to me for? What do they need from me as a leader, and what have I accidentally trained them to expect from me? And this is important if you're naturally, a supportive empath. Your vulnerability may actually make you approachable, and that's beautiful. But without boundaries, approachability can actually turn into unlimited access. And when you get intentional about protecting your time, you're also teaching your team members to value their time. Predictable boundaries build trust. You don't want to rely on emotional explanations every single time that you need space. So when boundaries are clear, precise, predictable, they feel professional. When they are random, they feel personal. For example, just try challenging yourself to not reward poor planning with instant access to your energy. Here's a team member who does not make it in time for a crucial meeting, and this forces you to rearrange, slides, or even randomly just pick somebody else to do their presentation. You want to resist making a decision from a place of emotional overwhelm, and instead just take a step back, look at the globality of the situation, and if there's a visible pattern that needs attention, make a firm but very supportive decision moving forward. And here you're simply saying, you can count on me, but you cannot consume me. And people are going to see this and they will adjust, because from your demeanor, not everything is a crisis. At number 6, the 24-hour buffer for non-emergencies. In leadership, it's very easy to become addicted to being needed, because it feels like proof that, you matter. So every message answered quickly just gives you that dopamine surge, that small emotional reward, like they trust me, they need me, I'm important, I'm doing a good job, but ego aside, do you know that constant responsiveness can actually become a trap? Like the faster you respond to everything, the more people are going to expect immediate access to your attention. And we have this African proverb that says, he who is being carried does not realize just how far the town is. You don't want your ability to solve problems to actually become the reason that other people stop solving problems, or for your emotional intelligence to become the reason other people start avoiding difficult conversations, or even for your reliability to become the reason poor planning continues within the organization. If you answer everything in 30 seconds, your team members are going to stop solving problems and make it your responsibility. And then eventually you're going to find that your calendar, your inbox, your phone, your team's needs, all these just start running your role instead of your daily priorities taking center stage. Worse still, you're going to become a stumbling block to your team members' progress within the organization, because by solving everything for them, you're actually preventing them from thinking, from deciding, from growing for and by themselves. And this puts them at a disadvantage when growth opportunities show up. So if you want to suffocate dependency, it's very important to accept the fact that your constant availability does not help your team members, and actively resist the urge to respond to emails instantly by creating response windows at least 24 hours after you have thought through the requests. And this is going to protect your deep work, and it's also going to teach your team members and your peers that your attention has structure. You're not just ignoring anybody, you are consciously leading your own attention. And the one thing you're going to notice is the learned helplessness within your team members is going to be dismantled, forcing in a culture of self-reliance. And the moment you also resist the urge to be a human Google who provides instant answers, you're creating a vacuum that your team members have to fill with their own critical thinking and resourcefulness. And this intentional delay serves as a silent vote of confidence in their competence, which ultimately transforms you into a strategic leader, someone who can actually scale through empowered independent problem solvers. At number 5, set intentional distance during crisis. And I personally believe this is the heart of boundary protection angle. It's very easy to protect your schedule without putting into consideration your emotional energy. And the fact that you are emotionally intelligent does not mean that you should become the emotional container for everybody else at work. In leadership, by default, people are going to come to you not only for decisions, but for reassurance, for validation, for emotional regulation. And you can easily absorb everyone's anxiety, frustration, fear, disappointments, and urgency. So your call here is to train yourself to care about people without absorbing all the emotions. You can support without rescuing, you can validate without taking ownership of someone else's situation. And for most empathetic leaders, you will feel it when someone is struggling. You can sense the tension in the room because you care. So when someone comes to you and and emotions are just running high, try taking 10 minutes before reacting to the news, And here you'll actually be providing a much steadier hand when you're not available for immediate panic reaction. And then when you're ready, say something to the tune of, I can see that this is frustrating. Let's separate what you're feeling from what needs to happen next. Or, I hear you, what support do you need from me so that we can move forward? Or even you can say something like, I want you to give this the attention it deserves. So let us schedule a time, let's pick a time rather than just trying to solve it in the middle of another priority. And what you're doing here is you're demonstrating emotional regulation. And these phrases that you're using are going to allow you to remain compassionate, but without becoming consumed. And this is where vulnerability becomes your leadership strength. The leadership lesson here is learning how to stay connected without becoming emotionally overexposed. At number 4, empower the deputy of the day. One way your strength as a leader, as a mentor shines through is in your ability to let go of control, your way of actively investing in someone else's career capital. The deputy of the day is that rotating role where you delegate authority, to a team member of your choice to act as your proxy in high-level discussions. So before the big meeting, you're going to want to spend at least 5 minutes with the one person that you have chosen as your deputy so that you can align on the goals and then explicitly tell the meeting organizer, I'll not be attending this meeting, but Susie has full authority to make decisions on my behalf, and then confidently stay out. And you'll quickly notice that you don't have to be in every single room to prove that you're productive, to prove your productivity. Your constant presence may actually be what is keeping your team members from growing within the organization. Stepping aside, especially from meetings that you're not as essential to, is actually the ultimate sign of trust. You're literally saying, I trust your judgment more than I need to hear my own voice. I'm stepping out so that you can step up. And the major upsides that you're going to notice here are your team will be able to function well even in your absence, and you'll comfortably reclaim your deep work time for high-level strategy. You'll also be able to make room for your team members to gain visibility with the senior stakeholders within the organization, and this is going to in turn challenge them to develop executive presence, but in a safe to fail environment. In many organizations, there's this gap between a person's title and their actual power. So when you appoint a deputy, you literally bridge that gap. And please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but when you as the leader are always in the room, your team members will instinctively look to you for the final note before speaking. But when you physically or digitally remove yourself from the environment, you remove that invisible ceiling, and this boundary is actually a gift of space. So when you operate as a leader, the verb, your absence in the room should actually be more empowering than your presence. I'm going to say that, for the people sitting at the back. When you operate as a leader, the verb, your absence in the room should be more empowering than your presence. This is actually the difference between being a safety net and being a launch pad. I honestly hope that this video is resonating with you, and please let me know in the comments section, if you've struggled with boundaries in the past, or you're actually struggling with boundaries at the moment, and the one thing that you'd like to put into practice moving forward. At number 3, model the digital sunset. Burnout sometimes catches up with us because we don't define the limits of our availability. If one day, you're answering messages at midnight, and then the next day, you're the one who's very serious saying, please respect my personal time, people are going to become confused. But if you consistently communicate, I do not respond to non-urgent messages after 6 p.m., but I will get back to you the next business day. Your peers, your team members, they're going to adjust. The digital sunset dictates the unspoken rules of your team's nervous system. So you want to signal to everybody that rest is a professional requirement and not a guilty pleasure. So as the leader, your intent might actually be just to clear your inbox by 10 p.m. so that you can sleep well, or you can sleep better. However, the impact on your team is totally different. When they see a notification from you that late at night, they may actually feel like they're falling behind, and they must stay on to remain relevant. So if you must work late just to find your own peace of mind, like it's something that I do a lot, try to schedule the send feature for 8 a.m. the next morning, and here you'll get the task done, but your teams and your peers will also get a silent night. Then consciously define the red phone. And here what you do is you create a boundary that says, I'm offline by 6:30 p.m. and if there's a true revenue collapsing emergency, call me on my cell. If you don't call, I'm going to assume that it can wait until breakfast. You could also use a visual cue for your team members, like an out of office status to show that the shop is closed, So be honest enough and even a bit vulnerable with your team members, like, I stopped responding at 6:30 p.m. because I've actually realized that if I don't pour into my own life as a mom, as a friend, as a gardener, as a partner, I show up to work the next morning feeling like a hollow version of myself. And as I respect my own time, I hope that you're okay to respect yours. And this is where your strength actually shines through. So instead of pretending that you're a 24/7 productivity machine, you're actually admitting your limitations. And your silence after hours is the loudest way that you can tell your team members that you trust them to live their own lives, So by modeling the sunset, you're not just protecting your own time, you're actually giving your team members their lives back. The digital sunset culture is a breath of fresh air from the always on culture. Your team members are going to develop high trust, high loyalty, deep focused execution, very proactive, sustainable performance, as opposed to burnout, high anxiety, shallow performative work with a constant firefighting mentality. At number 2, radical transparency on cognitive load. Sometimes we struggle in leadership because we treat our brains like an infinite hard drive when it's more like a CPU with limited processing power. Radical transparency on cognitive load is actually the act of making your internal mental bandwidth visible to the outside world. Being open about your calendar or your current capacity. Just think of it as brain battery versus calendar space. And we've all had those days where your calendar says you're free at 2 p.m. but your brain is still running. Your brain still feels busy, like there's so much to do, so many tabs are open, and maybe you just even finished a heavy one-on-one meeting or a high-stakes speech. Your calendar has a hole, yes, but your mental gas tank is running on empty. And just because you have the time does not necessarily mean that you have the juice. You don't have to pretend that you're a robot. Try using a simple color-coded capacity signal for your team members especially. It's like a traffic light for your brain, where the red status means that your brain is already saturated. Only knock if the building is literally on fire. And then use the yellow status to mean that the brain is at 80%. I'm here, yes, but expect a slow reply from me. And then the green status to say, I've got the energy, let's brainstorm, and let's brainstorm today and now. And when you do this, you're actually showing your team members that your best work requires your best energy. And you're teaching them that saying yes to a random quick question is actually saying no to the important project that you're supposed to be finishing. Basically, trading being busy for being impactful. So moving forward, you want to start giving energy budget updates. Like in your weekly stand-up, don't just share what you're doing, share your load level. Like, I'm at 90% capacity this week due to the budget audit. I have zero room for new quick asks. If you want me to give the audit the attention it deserves, the attention it needs. And then make your calendar public. Don't just mark things as busy, label them. Like, if you're thinking, mark it as strategic thinking time. And then when someone brings in a new task, because it will happen, show them your cue. Like, I can do this, but it is going to push project Y to next Tuesday. Are we okay with that trade-off? And when you share your load, others are going to get it, and they'll also understand when you're overwhelmed. And then now you can negotiate deadlines, but based on quality. And here you're also helping your team members to focus on done well rather than just done. They'll be able to actually raise a hand before a burnout induced mistake happens. This brings us to number 1, the quality of entry rule. You want to protect your boundaries without seeming defensive. And the quality of entry rule is going to turn you from a bottleneck boss into a coach. In leadership, you can actually get overwhelmed, not because people are malicious, but because they don't know how to, they really don't know how to approach you effectively. So they're going to come to you with half-formed problems. They're going to come to you with vague questions, emotional dumping, or even decisions that they have not thought through. And they're not trying to be annoying. They're not trying to waste your time. They just don't know how to use your brain effectively. So if you just say, I'm too busy right now, you're going to come across as cold in their eyes. But if you say yes to everybody else, you're also going to become a human dumping ground for other people's to-do list. So what you need now is high resolution access, where instead of closing your door, you actually set a standard of entry. You're not just saying, don't come to me. You're saying, come to me, but come prepared. And this is where the power trio requirement comes in handy. Before they get your time, they need to bring at least 3 things. Number 1, the context. What is actually happening? Number 2, the options. What are the 2 ways that we could fix this? Number 3, the recommendation. If I were not here, if I were not in the room, what would you do? And by demanding a recommendation, you're actually forcing your people to practice being a leader. You want them to be the leader. You're protecting your time, but you're also building their confidence. And the truth is, when you jump in to solve every problem immediately, you may actually be thinking that, you're being that supportive boss, but your ego may actually be hurting your team members' growth, as I have earlier mentioned. You're literally denying them the chance to be the hero. So asking for a recommendation first shows that you believe in their judgment more than they do yet. So instead of a team member coming to you and saying, the client is mad, what are we going to do? You want them to embrace saying, the client is mad, here are 2 ways to fix it, and I think we should go with option B. This boundary is actually a call on you to resist being a safety net and start being a trampoline. A safety net is going to catch people when they fall, but a trampoline actually gives them the structure that they need to jump and keep jumping higher on their own. Just keep in mind that you're not building a wall to keep anyone out. You're actually building a container to keep your energy in. And as I was taught, your safety comes first. Effective leadership is not about becoming the emergency exit for every problem. You want to build doors, you want to build pathways, you want to build the confidence so that people know how to move forward. I hope you received value from this video, and if you did, I'd really like to know what struck you the most. What struck you the most? Is it your calendar? Is it your inbox? Your emotions? Your sense of responsibility? I recently released a career growth acceleration app that can actually give you a personalized step-by-step process on how to navigate your boundaries and do it seamlessly. I'm going to leave the link in the comments. I'm going to leave it in the description box just in case you want to have a look. And also feel free to share this video with a friend or two who stand to benefit from this kind of content. And then take a moment to have a look at the video on your screen, on how self-care fuels career advancement. It literally goes hand in hand with this video, and it's going to reinforce why boundaries matter in leadership. Thank you so much for your company, and see you on the next one. Bye.